Okay, now we're going to start with our next speaker, and he is Juan Luis, and he's going to talk about IPython, how a notebook is changing science.
Thank
you. So, Juan Luis.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. I would like to thank, first of all, the PyCon Sweden organization for organizing this great PyCon and for inviting me, because I just landed yesterday at midnight just for coming to this conference, and I'm leaving tomorrow in the afternoon, so it's going to be very brief. But so far, I'm having a great time. I've seen that there are many data science-oriented talks in this conference, and this I like it very much because it's the field that I'm most comfortable with. And I don't know if you noticed, but many of these talks have been talking about the IPython notebook, beginning with the keynote of Ian Oswald, and also many of the talks that we've seen about this data science. So I'm going to explain what is this IPython notebook thing about, finally. And I would like to do a brief survey about our audience, because you are the best audience I've ever talked to. I have the opportunity to talk to some of you, and not all, obviously. For example, how many of you have ever done some data analysis or feedback control system analysis or something like that in tools like MATLAB? Okay, and how many of you like it? There's one person. Okay. So I'm not going to criticize MATLAB too much, because actually I don't use it at all. So I don't have much authority to criticize it. But instead, I'm going to talk about some open tools that I think that have their own merits and that are very useful. So let's begin. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Juan Cano. I'm almost an aeronautical engineering, because I'm in my last year of studies, hopefully. We used to study some Fortran in second year, optionally. You could select programming or English. I took the hard way. I like challenges. But soon I realized that Fortran was not enough for what I wanted to do, so I started learning Python on my own. We run a scientific blog, let's say, about Python in scientific computing, which is called Python. We only write in Spanish, so I'm sorry for the non-Spanish speaking audience. I'm also the chair of the Python Space Association. We organize the PyCon Spain annually, so if you want to go, I totally recommend you, because this year there are going to be 2 Python events in Spain. And I also carry other projects, and especially I will talk about one of them in the lightning talk session, which is coming next. I will only say that perhaps we will see a way to go to Mars with Python. And then you decide. So let's get to the point. Talking about things that orbit, let me introduce an analogy that I like very much to justify in the first place why the IPython notebook is important and why, what is its mission in the scientific world. In this talk, you are going to see very little code, I'm sorry. But we are talking instead about science and philosophy. How cool is that? Have you ever heard of the Russell's Teapot? Okay. Well, it is a metaphor suggested in 1952 by the English philosopher Bertrand Russell in the context of refutability of statements, religion, and stuff like that. I'm not going to talk about religion. Just to make it clear, but I'm going to use the metaphor for explaining one thing that you're going to understand very soon. The only reason for it to be a teapot is probably because Bertrand Russell was English. If he had been Spanish, it would be Garcia's cup of café con leche or something like that. So basically, what Russell suggested boils down to this. If I suggest that between Earth and Mars, there's a teapot revolving around the sun in an elliptic orbit, as long as I assure that there is no such enough powerful telescope on Earth to detect it, then nobody can refute their existence. And this example, which can seem a bit weird or out of context, is very important, because many authors think that the refutability of an argument is what makes the difference between what is science and what is not. And you will see a very clear example of Russell's Teapot in the 21st century. In May 2010, two economists from the Harvard University, Carmen Reinhardt and Kenneth Rogoff, published an article in a number of the American Economic Review, a number without peer review, claiming that when the debt of the country surpassed a level of 90% of the gross domestic product, its economy would recess. The economic crisis of 2008 was very recent at that time, and this theory was used to support and justify measures of austerity all around the Western world, especially in Europe, and especially in some countries in the south of Europe, for example, the one where I was born. However, some researchers were a bit worried about the conclusions of this study, so started digging on this study and asked the original researchers for the original data and the methodology that they used to reach to these conclusions. After 3 years of struggling, the team of researchers in the University of Massachusetts published an analysis of the original paper with the data, showing that the conclusions were simply not true. Like in the first place, some dubious methodologic procedures were followed, some very strange statistical arguments were used, and some arithmetic mistakes in the Excel spreadsheet were also helping the conclusions. So this team published the final data and published an article and also an R program which you could follow to see what was actually the statistical analysis that was carried out on this data. So that's it. But is there a better way? Like, is there a way that we can reach the public and tell the whole story with the explanations and the code together? Enter the IPython notebook. Okay, so what is this IPython notebook thing? Well, on the one hand, it was born as a Python interpreter in the browser. Like, it has some special things to mix not only the code, but also the graphics that I have, some audio or even video that I can mix, and also the text. As you can see in other talks that we have had this morning, I can have the executable code and also the text. It is clearly inspired by the Mathematica notebooks, if anyone has used it. And I would like to do a demo just to show one of the most interesting capabilities of the notebook. This, as you can see, is the website of the Nature Scientific. Sorry, you don't see a thing, but I will fix that very soon. Okay? This double monitor is a mess. Okay, so this is the website of the Nature Scientific Journal, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but here they have a demo of this IPython notebook. I will open it in full screen. Okay, so there you have it. I have here the Nature logo, very pretty, and some introduction about what are we going to see. And for example, one of the things that this notebook has, which is running in a dedicated server somewhere else that I don't care, because this is not yet capable of running all the code in the browser, obviously. And for example, one thing that I have is a simple plot. Okay, nothing special here. It can display some math too, in a very fancy way, as you can see. But one very interesting thing that I have is these interactive plots things. For example, here you can see the typical aliasing example, which appears very frequently in signal processing. As you can see here, I can move one of these sliders and change instantly one of the values of the analysis. Okay, I can also change the frequency. Okay. And all you had to do is to create a function with some parameters and then convert it to some interactive graphic. This not only works with simple matplotlib plots, but also with things like this. This is an image processing algorithm that is counting the galaxies in this astronomic picture. And if I change one of the parameters of this algorithm, for example, the threshold, there I can see that the number of galaxies there is changing. So also in real time, well, almost real time. And that's it. This is the story about the IPython notebook. So going back to our example before, wait, I want this toolbar outside. Sorry. Well, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Okay. Okay, as we were saying before, our example about the Reiner and Drawoff article, Fernando Perez, which is the creator of the IPython, which is from Colombia, he said on Twitter, as soon as this counter-analysis appeared, he said, "Oh, how cool would be if someone could provide this in an IPython notebook form?" And like 2 hours later or something like that, a guy said, "Yeah, I already have it." So yes, you can already see it. It's the same as before, the code and the text, but everything mixed together with all the plots, and it can be seen by anybody. Okay, I don't have to convince you how good Python is, but I just wanted to remind the audience that it's not only used in many big technological companies like Google, Dropbox, and everything, but also in companies that have very serious engineering and scientific stuff like the European Space Agency, the German Space Agency, the CERN, and the company where I am working on now. Okay, so as Ian Oswald told this morning, the IPython notebook is not an IDE, it's not an integrated development environment, it's not very useful to develop very big applications, but it can be very useful as a teaching tool, for example. I've been using it for a year and a half now, and as you can mix the explanations with the code, it's very, very useful to teach beginners how this Python thing works, and it's very visual because they can immediately see all the plots and everything. So there are already several courses in many different topics. For example, Lorena Barba is a professor in aerodynamics in the University of Washington. And also you have data science courses, this famous book, Bayesian Methods for Hackers, which is awesome. And also we have our own course in Spanish with Python for aeronautical engineers. In this context, last year in 2014, suddenly Nature highlighted the IPython notebook in its journal in the front matter. And suddenly, many people realized that this had a very, very big potential. It was explaining that not only can you use IPython for doing data analysis or whatever, but also to communicate the results to peers or to anybody that you want. And many more articles follow, but also highlighting that there's not the need to use only one tool, like only the Python language, but there are also many open source tools that we can use, and they all have their strengths and their weaknesses. Okay, I think I also don't have to convince you that open source is good, but in the environment that I work, usually I have to face some myths, some questions that people ask me that are misguided or that show lack of understanding, and I would like to address them in this talk. For example, the first one is that there is no support for open source software, like this is made by volunteers on weekends while the children are sleeping or something like that, and I cannot call anybody on the phone. The other thing, which is very funny, I think, is that they go and ask me, you know, this Python thing is very nice, but it's going to be free for how long? It's a very strange question, but I have had to answer it in a couple of times. But yes, there are people that have the concern that these are free tools, free as in beer, free as in freedom, but that sometimes the Python Software Foundation or something, they are going to charge us for using it. And the other one is that free software has bugs, for the same reason as the first one, that this is made by volunteers, that people that we don't know their formal training or their background or anything, so we don't have the guarantee that it's going to work. Okay, obviously, at least in the scientific Python context, there are already many companies that provide Python support, so there's no question about that. The thing about the freedom of the software is pretty clear too, because I'm sure many of you remember the thing about LibreOffice, about MySQL in its moment. In the end, from the moment when you publish something, it already belongs to the community. So if some company is trying to take care of it, it's great. But if not, then anybody can take it and do whatever it wants. Well, and the last one, well, yes, free software has bugs. I think we can all agree on that, but only free software has bugs. There was a very funny article in October 2014 about computer algebra systems. There was 3 Spanish mathematicians published in the American Society of Mathematics journal. They were publishing that they had a problem with Mathematica and Maple. In this case, with Mathematica, there was a problem when they were trying to compute the determinants of big integer matrices. And the thing is that when they tried to isolate the problem, they saw that in the end, you could perform the computation in one line, then repeat the following line after that, and the results were different. So they could not understand what was happening. They told the company in charge of Mathematica, and they said, OK, thank you very much. You discovered a bug. We're going to work about it. And then the following version still had the same problem. So in the end, this is exactly what could happen to any open source tool. Like, they have a list of the issues, of the bugs of the software, and they say, OK, when we have time, we're going to take care of it. But in principle, you are paying a high sum of money to these companies to solve the bugs, and sometimes they don't hear you. So the moral here is that software has bugs always. Right? And we have to convince ourselves about this thing, and the sooner we do it, the better it's going to be. OK, so I've been talking a while about open source software, but I've been not talking about Python for a while. The thing is that in 2013, I had the opportunity to talk with Fernando Palin, which, as I said, is the creator of IPython. And I was very enthusiastic at the moment. I was very young. And I asked him, Fernando, do you think that in the future we're going to do all the data analysis, all the scientific computing in Python? And he said, no, obviously not. But why would we want to do that? Because we have many tools, many languages that we can combine together and make the most of their advantages. So this philosophy is what is powering the next iteration of the IPython project, which is Jupyter. Jupyter is a word game between Julia, Python, and R, which are 3 open source languages for doing scientific computing. And this is already a reality in the sense that they separated on one side what is the core, let's say the protocol and the interface that you saw of the notebook and everything. And on the other side, they separated the support for a specific language. So you have now 2 components. Like as I saw the kernel, let's say, which in this case would be a Python kernel. And then you have the interface, the protocols, the tools, and everything. The good thing about this is that now they support 33 languages. Last time I checked, I'm counting. You can even do MATLAB in the notebook, and this is no joke. This is a real screenshot. So this is, if you think about it, this is perfect because if you're working in a company where they used to use MATLAB or anything, you can do a gradual transition and say, OK, what do you think about this interface? Do you like it? OK. What do you think about exchanging variables transparently between a MATLAB cell and a Python cell and an R cell? Because you can do it already with the tools that we have. So you don't have to throw years of effort to the trash bin, because you already have it and you can use it. But you can combine it with new and more recent tools. This is a slide that I added some minutes ago, because things are moving really fast. And last week, there were 2 very important events in this context. To begin with, GitHub already renders IPython notebooks. So if you upload them to any GitHub repository, you are going to have a pre-visualization of how that notebook works, similar to what we do with NV Viewer, but without getting out of GitHub. And the second thing, which I think is very important, is that O'Reilly, the publishing company that we all love, is adopting IPython notebooks as a way, well, Jupyter notebooks, as a way to publish now books. Like, and this is perfect because if you are working on a technical book, on a programming book, it's perfect to mix the code with the explanation, with the results. And you can even send it to O'Reilly and have it in the form of a book. So this is perfect. OK, now there are many, many tools that you can use, many resources that you can look for. OK, this is almost for very beginners, but there are many tutorials. The IPython development is moving really fast. There is a project, a very interesting project for those who don't know it, which is Software Carpentry, which is a group of people trying to teach programming to people who are not, don't have a formal training in programming, who just want to use it as a tool. Like, they are not programmers, but they need it. And there are also many open MOOCs and everything. So in the end, what I wanted to convey in this talk is that openness of the tools that we use to carry scientific developments are very, very important. And the more open we go, the more reproducible will be our conclusions, and the best it will be for science. So please, no more teapots, and thank you very much.
Hey, thanks so much for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree that IPython rocks, especially for reproducibility of research. Can you tell a bit about for yourself as you're a researcher or doing, you say you're teaching. So how do you use like IPython for reproducible research, or how do you see yourself? Did this have changed also with kind of adding new things to it all the time?
Yes. Well, my first contact with the IPython notebook was as a teaching tool. Like, I've been giving courses for undergrads, people who are used to programming MATLAB or even only Fortran 77, to teach them Python, and I found it a very useful tool. Like, the other alternative, let's say the classic way, would be to launch some text editor, and my users work in Windows, so that boils down to using Notepad, or making them installing Notepad++ or something like that. And probably a complete IDE is too much for them, because at the beginning they don't need auto-completion, or they don't need syntax. No, well, not syntax highlighting, but I don't know, some special tools that help you to carry more complex developings. And next, as a researcher, let's say, well, I'm not a researcher at all, but I'm developing my personal project, a library about astrodynamics, which, as I said, I'm going to introduce it in the lightning talks. And for example, I saw that it's perfect for providing examples, for example, on how to use your library. Because you can explain as a documentation, like, OK, here you have my code, here is the relationship between the objects that you have, and here you have a nice plot of an orbit and everything. So in this sense, I think it's perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you, Andy, and I think it was both mentioned that IPython is not production and it's not an IDE. What are the pieces that are missing? I mean, it sounds like it would be a great IDE if I could do some kind of development. It's almost like live programming. Are there pieces where you can export into a library or use that, or what's the gap?
Well, IPython as a project, you can use it as a library. It's not very common, but you can use it. The thing is that, for example, when this runs in the browser, and when you start having 300 cells, for example, it just doesn't work. It starts lagging and being very slow, and that is a bit frustrating. So the thing that we noticed when doing these courses for aeronautical engineering students is that, OK, people use the notebook all the time, and then at some point they start wondering, OK, but this is like a bit limited, or how can I have more information, or something that is not slow when I have a lot of code? So in the end, for example, you like some things like a variable inspector, for example, or things like the possibility to navigate between the classes and the modules of the project. I don't know, there are very specific things. But for example, I started using PyCharm and Eclipse and these kind of tools quite recently, and you feel the difference. Like it's not complete in that sense, but I don't think it's its intention, because they are trying to provide other things.
Is it a lack of maturity? Can it get there? Or
I don't think so. It's not in the roadmap, I think. I cannot speak on behalf of the project, but I don't think they're planning on these kind of things. They're planning, for example, in improving the security, as I am told this morning, so you can deploy, for example, an Python notebook server, and they are trying to improve, probably for the next version, the possibility that you can use it in a classroom, for example, and that many students can work on the same notebook at the same time. For example, the possibility to map the notebook users to operative system users. So, and this is the kind of things that they are working on, not in integrated features, I think.
When you were talking about MATLAB, you said you could share data between the cells, between languages.
Yes.
How does that, what's the underlying sort of, is it like Panda data frame something, or is it internal to?
No, when you see that cell, it's just MATLAB code and there's nothing special there. The thing is that if I go to the IPython demo again, do you see it? No, you don't. No, I closed it. Well, doesn't matter. You can select the language of the notebook that you're using, but you can select the language by default, let's say, but you can say above the cell, you can say, okay, this is going to be a MATLAB cell. So if your notebook is a Python notebook, you can still write MATLAB, and you can write another line saying, okay, take this t variable and take it outside so I can use it in another cell. There's a specific syntax for that, so you can exchange variables between kernels and between cells.
But then all the languages need to support exchange.
Exactly, but they do. If I have 1 second left, the Spanish Python community is very strong, and we're going to have, as I said, 2 Python events this year, and we even have PyLadies, which is an awesome group to teach programming for women, and if you can reach me there, obviously in our blog, well, we write in Spanish, but you can send me any kind of question to email, and I will be glad to respond.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Thank you so much.